Have you ever sat in a corporate meeting, understood every single English word individually, but still felt like you, I don't know, missed a critical software update in your brain?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very specific kind of panic.
Right. Like you're looking at the PowerPoint, your grammar is totally flawless, but then someone says, we need to push back the kickoff so we don't end up snowed under before we touch base with the clients.
Yeah.
And suddenly you are just completely lost in a sea of prepositions.
It is honestly the ultimate frustration for non-native professionals.
Yeah.
You spend years passing advanced exams, mastering the perfect passive voice.
Oh, all those grammar drills.
Exactly. And then you walk into a Monday morning strategy meeting and realize nobody actually speaks like a textbook. They speak in this, well, this coded multi-word language.
Which is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We are decoding the secret operating system of the modern workplace, which is, of course, business phrasal verbs.
Yes, the actual language of business.
Right. We've gone through hundreds of pages of corporate communication transcripts, advanced professional training materials, and linguistic analyses just to figure out how these expressions actually function in the wild.
And, to be clear, if you're listening to this, you definitely don't need a basic vocabulary lesson. You already know the formal words, postpone and initiate.
Yeah, you've got the foundation.
Right. Our goal here is to bridge that final frustrating gap to true C1 or C2 fluency. Because understanding these verbs isn't just about vocabulary. It is about office survival.
Totally.
It's what allows you to navigate the complexities, the passive aggression, and the really subtle power dynamics of a corporate culture.
Well, before we get into the boardroom tactics, I kind of want to look at the psychology of this. Like, why do native English speakers rely so heavily on these strange two-part verbs?
It's a great question.
If I know the word continue, why on earth do I need to learn carry on? It just feels like we invented a secondary language purely to make things difficult.
It really does feel that way sometimes, I won't lie. But the mechanism behind it is actually all about friction.
Friction.
Yeah. Formal academic English is high friction in a social setting.
Yeah.
If you rely purely on traditional, Latin-based vocabulary, your English sounds incredibly stiff. Think about the transcripts we reviewed. Imagine a colleague standing up in a casual meeting and saying, "I will continue my work."
Oh, wow. It sounds like an automated Slack bot or like an out-of-office autoresponder.
Exactly.
It's grammatically flawless, but there's just zero human warmth to it.
That's the perfect way to describe it. It's robotic. Now, contrast that with, "I will carry on with my work."
Yeah.
The literal meaning is identical, but the social meaning shifts entirely.
All right, it feels different.
The speaker sounds relaxed. They sound fluent and quietly confident. So phrasal verbs act as this linguistic lubricant. They remove the friction from workplace interactions.
Okay, let's unpack this. I usually think of them like spices in cooking. If you just use academic words, your speech is perfectly nutritious, but it's incredibly bland. You need the spices to give it flavor.
I'd push back on the spice analogy a bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because spices are relatively safe.
Yeah.
If you put too much oregano in a dish,
Yep.
it just tastes a little weird. Phrasal verbs are much more like mixing chemical compounds.
Okay, that sounds dangerous.
It kind of is. You change one tiny particle and the entire reaction explodes.
Yeah.
Like you have come in, which just means to enter a room. But if you accidentally swap that particle and say come across, suddenly it means to find something by chance or to give a certain impression.
Right.
The stakes for getting the particle wrong are surprisingly high.
That is a terrifying but very accurate way to put it. And because it's like mixing chemicals, advanced learners tend to overthink it, which leads to this really common hypercorrection. There was a fascinating pattern in the corporate training data around the phrase do-over.
Oh, the redundancy trap.
Yep.
Yes, this is a massive tell for non-native speakers. Do-over means to execute a task again because the first attempt failed.
Right, like an agency pitching a bad ad campaign. The client might say, we need a do-over on this presentation.
Exactly. But advanced learners know that the word over by itself rarely means again. So their brain panics, they hypercorrect, and they end up saying, "I need to do it over again."
They double up the meaning.
Yes. The again is completely redundant. It's a tiny error. But to a native ear, it immediately flags the speaker as someone who is translating in their head rather than speaking naturally. You just say, "I need to do it over."
So if the theory is that we need to avoid sounding like a Slack bot and we need to be incredibly precise with our chemical mixtures, let's look at how this actually plays out in the daily grind.
Let's do it.
Project management is where these verbs seem to do the heaviest lifting, right?
Oh, absolutely. The entire life cycle of a corporate task is defined by phrasal verbs, specifically these spatial metaphors. Notice how often we use words involving physical movement up, down, back, forward to describe abstract workflows.
Actually, let's demonstrate this to hear the rhythm of it. Let's do a quick role play. It's just the kind of conversation you'd hear on a stressed out Tuesday afternoon. I'll be the overly optimistic project manager and you be the overwhelmed team lead. Ready.
Born ready for corporate overwhelm. Let's hear it.
Okay. Hey, I know things are busy, but we really need to kick off the Q3 marketing campaign next Monday.
Look, my team is underwater. We simply can't take on any new deliverables right now.
I hear you, but that supplier delay last month really set us back. The timeline is incredibly tight.
I know, but if we don't get some extra headcount, we're never going to catch up to the original schedule.
Okay, scene.
Nailed it.
The momentum in that tiny exchange is entirely driven by those verbs. Starting with kickoff. I mean, it's almost become a corporate cliche at this point, the kickoff meeting. But it persists because it carries an energy that a word like initiate just lacks. It implies an aggressive, physical launch.
Yeah, like a football game. And my response was that I couldn't take on more work. That's a crucial boundary-setting verb. We don't say accept responsibility because take on carries the actual physical weight of a burden. You take it on your shoulders.
Right.
Which, of course, leads directly into the risk of burnout.
Then we hit the friction, the setback, the external delay. What's so interesting to me is how seamlessly this transitions into a noun in business culture.
Oh, yeah?
You rarely hear a manager say, we experienced a delay. They say, we had a major setback. It sounds less like a failure of planning and more like some unpredictable force of nature.
Which necessitates the final verb we used, catch up. The desperate sprint to reach the expected baseline.
Yeah.
But I actually want to explore what happens when you are in the middle of that sprint and you encounter a problem. How do you describe fixing it?
Well, this is where I found the nuances in our sources incredibly helpful. If a project is a total disaster, let's say the budget is completely wrong and two departments are literally fighting, I know I need to sort out the mess.
Yes.
But if the project is like 99% done and the margins on the presentation just look a little weird, I wouldn't say I'm going to sort it out, would I? That sounds way too dramatic for a font issue.
It is too dramatic. And this is where advanced learners can really level up their fluency. You sort out structural, organizational chaos. But for the final 1%, you use a completely different verb. You iron out the details.
I love the visual of that so much.
Isn't it great?
Yeah, you have a shirt that is already tailored, it's clean, it's put together, it just has a few tiny wrinkles left in the fabric. You take a hot iron, smooth it over, and it's pristine. We just need to iron out a few clauses in the contract.
It's deeply reassuring. When a manager hears, we are sorting out the contract, they panic because it implies structural instability.
They think the deal is broken.
Right. But when they hear, we are ironing out the contract, they relax. It signals that the heavy lifting is done. The choice of verb directly dictates the anxiety level of the room.
And inevitably, while you are ironing out those wrinkles, you find an issue that you have to escalate to leadership, which basically brings us out of the project management software and into the boardroom.
The real battlefield.
Navigating the nuance of a meeting is essentially a masterclass in using phrasal verbs as a social lubricant.
The boardroom is a high-wire act. You are constantly managing egos, competing for resources, and, delivering news that people often don't want to hear. The way you introduce information can literally change your entire career trajectory. Look at the difference between bring up and point out.
Okay, yeah. To bring something up is to introduce a totally new topic into the ecosystem, like, I'd like to bring up the revised budget for Q3. You are basically placing the elephant in the room.
Exactly. You are lifting it up onto the table. But if you want to call specific attention to a fact that is already on the table, or subtly highlight someone else's oversight, you point out, like, I'd like to point out that we only have 2 weeks of runway left on this budget.
Point out almost feels like weaponized politeness.
It really does.
You are pointing a metaphorical finger directly at a problem, but hiding behind the casual nature of the phrasal verb.
It's a very safe way to be aggressive. And you see this exact same dynamic with how we manage time in meetings. Have you noticed how business English treats time as a physical object sitting on a desk?
Yes. If we want to meet sooner, we bring the meeting forward. We literally pull it closer to us.
Yeah.
But if we are going the other direction, delaying the meeting, the vocabulary splits, you can put off a meeting or you can push back a meeting.
Right.
And they definitely do not mean the same thing.
They don't. Put off implies reluctance, procrastination, or an indefinite delay. I've been putting off that performance review. It sounds slightly irresponsible?
Like you're avoiding it.
Right. But pushback is strategic. Let's push back the launch to 3 p.m. You are physically resisting the schedule. And what I find brilliant about pushback is how it externalizes the blame.
Oh, how so?
Well, if I say, I am delaying the meeting, I am the villain. If I say, let's push this back, it feels like we're collaboratively fighting the calendar together.
Wow, that depersonalization of conflict is the secret genius of business English.
Totally.
You see it when explaining concepts, too. You rarely just explain a complex financial model to a client. That sounds condescending, like a teacher lecturing a student. Instead, you run through it or you walk through it.
And the pacing is right there in the words. Let's quickly run through the agenda. Implies checking boxes at high speed. We are sprinting past the details, but let me walk you through the new software interface is completely different.
Yeah, a player quickly touching the base to show they are safe before moving on. In business, it means we aren't doing a formal hour-long review. We are just going to tap the base for 5 minutes and get back to work.
Exactly. It gamifies the interaction, which reduces the stress.
Okay, but I have to bring up my absolute favorite verb from the boardroom section of our research talk around. When you are actively avoiding a direct answer,
Out classic.
it instantly conjures the image of a politician on a debate stage dodging a brutal question about taxes. Or, that one colleague in the Tuesday status meeting who hasn't finished their slide deck, and they spend 5 uninterrupted minutes talking around the fact that they have 0 data to present.
We have all suffered through that colleague's presentation. Talking around. The issue perfectly describes the physical geometry of their excuse. They are circling the core truth without ever actually intersecting with it.
So if we look at the macro picture of the boardroom, we're bringing things forward, pushing things back, walking people through ideas, and talking around our failures. Why do we rely on all these soft, physical metaphors instead of just being direct?
Well, because directness in the English-speaking corporate world is very frequently interpreted as hostility.
Really? Just directness?
Yeah. The culture values harmony and collaboration over blunt efficiency. The phrasal verbs act as a linguistic cushion. They allow professionals to disagree, delay, and correct one another without breaking the social fabric of the team.
A linguistic cushion. That makes total sense. But what happens when you touch base, walk through the numbers, and the news is terrible? Let's scale up from everyday meetings and look at high-stakes corporate moves. We're talking million-dollar negotiations, failing contracts, and massive company restructuring.
The big leagues.
Right. The cushion is still required, but the impact of getting it wrong is exponentially bigger.
In a high-stakes negotiation, the way you deploy phrasal verbs can literally make or break a deal. Let's look at rejection. You rarely hear someone in a high-level corporate negotiation say, "We reject your proposal. It's just too harsh." It slams the door shut and locks it.
Instead, you turn down the proposal. We had to turn down their initial offer. It's so much softer. The imagery is like taking a piece of paper and gently placing it face down on the desk. You considered it, but you're setting it aside.
And because you didn't slam the door, it leaves space for the next critical verb, which is come back with.
The counteroffer. We turned down their offer, but they came back with a much better price structure.
Yes. It creates a dance, a back-and-forth motion. And eventually, in most successful negotiations, someone has to give in, conceding on a painful point after a long battle. After 3 days of arguing, they finally gave in on the intellectual property clauses.
And once someone gives in, you reach the final satisfying stage. You need to tie up the contract, finalizing the loose ends, making sure the legal team has every signature, pulling the knot tight.
But we also have to talk about the dark side of high stakes. What happens when the knot doesn't hold?
Yeah, when deals die, we don't just say they ended or failed. We say they fell through. I've always found that to be such a visceral, dramatic phrase.
Very dramatic.
It makes me think of a wooden floor suddenly rotting away and the entire deal just drops into the abyss. We worked on the merger for 6 months, but it fell through at the last minute.
It is deeply visceral. Because a business deal is entirely abstract, it's just ideas and numbers on paper. We rely on the physical fear of gravity to communicate how devastating it feels to lose it.
That brings us to structural company changes. The training materials introduced 3 verbs that completely blew my mind: take over, sell up, and hive off. Now, takeover, I understand. A larger company acquiring control. A hostile takeover. But wait, hive off. Like a swarm of bees leaving to start a new colony. Why not just say spin-off or separate?
Because hive off contains a very specific operational reality. It's brilliant corporate poetry, really. To hive off means to separate a part of a larger company and turn it into a completely independent organization. But the bee metaphor is highly intentional.
So the mother company is the main beehive. They take a highly profitable department, say the experimental AI division, and they hive it off. They send those worker bees out to build their own entirely new separate structure.
Precisely. If you just separate a department, it sounds like you cut off an arm. It sounds dead. A hive implies that the new entity is self-sustaining. It has its own queen, its own workers, and it is buzzing with independent activity. It's a much more dynamic and accurate picture of what is actually happening.
Wow. And contrast that with the final high-stakes verb, sell up.
Right. Sell up is the end game. It means completing a massive transaction with the specific intention of leaving the business entirely. You aren't just selling a product, you are liquidating the entire operation to walk away. If the founders are retiring to a private island, they don't just sell, they sell up.
The imagery in all of these verbs is just staggering when you stop taking them for granted. Bees swarming, hot irons smoothing out wrinkles, trapdoors opening under failing deals, time physically being pushed back and forth across a boardroom table.
It takes dry, abstract business concepts and roots them in the physical, relatable world. It's how human beings process complex systems.
Well, looking at the clock, it is time for us to wrap this up, which is another great phrasal verb for concluding, pulling all the loose threads together. Let's do a rapid-fire recap of the corporate journey we just took. We started by exploring why we use these words to avoid sounding like a slackbot.
Essential.
We learned to kick off projects without hyper-correcting and trying to do them over again. We discovered the psychological comfort of ironing out the tiny details instead of dramatically sorting them out. We learned how to touch base and walk clients through ideas without talking around the uncomfortable truths.
And we covered a lot of ground.
And we scaled all the way up to high-stakes negotiations, where we turned down bad offers, tied up contracts, survived deals that fell through, and watched entire departments get hived off into self-sustaining ecosystems.
It is a massive amount of vocabulary to process. And the most important practical tip I can give you, based on how native speakers actually acquire this language, is this. Do not try to memorize a long alphabetical list of these verbs. It is an exercise in futility.
You'll just end up completely snowed under.
Exactly. Instead, learn them by their context and their mechanism. Group your negotiation verbs together, group your time management verbs together, and here's a challenge for you. Tomorrow morning, look at the emails you are writing or the meetings you are attending, and consciously try to use just 3 of these expressions. Just 3.
Just 3 tiny chemical adjustments.
Yeah, see how they feel in your mouth. Notice how your colleagues react when you say you want to walk through an idea rather than explain it to them.
That's a great challenge.
And I want to leave you with a final, broader concept to mull over. As we've discussed, so much of your success in the C-suite or the boardroom relies not just on what you know, but on how safely you can communicate difficult truths to the people around you.
Telling a client their launch is delayed or telling a CEO their strategy is fundamentally flawed.
Exactly. Phrasal verbs act as a linguistic shock absorber. They cushion the blow of delivering bad news. They soften the edges of asserting your boundaries. They turn aggressive demands into collaborative requests. So if learning these verbs can act as a shock absorber for your English communication, it raises an interesting question. What other areas of your professional life could benefit from a softer, more nuanced approach? Where else in your career are you being rigid when you could be flexible?
Oh, that is a fantastic question to chew on. So the next time you're sitting in that Monday morning strategy meeting, looking at the PowerPoint, and the jargon starts flying across the table, don't panic. You haven't missed an update. You're just listening to the natural rhythm, the spatial metaphors, and the essential shock absorbers of the English language doing their job. Take a breath, touch base with your notes, and jump right in.
Beautifully said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Go out there and crush your next kickoff meeting.